Revising on the spot has literally changed my life with law of assumption, and I'm gonna show you how I revise on the spot right now. Hello everyone, welcome to your self-love advocate. I'm Suhaiti. I talk about self-concept, self-love, law of assumption, and I really just share my manifestation journey with you all. I have been using a lot of revision in order to undo a lot of the old stories, specifically with self-concept. Revising is actually really easy. You can visualize, of course, and you can script, which is basically writing out the new story and reread that to yourself, and you can do a combination of both. Rewrite the story and use visualization as you reread it, and do that continuously until the first thing that you think about when you think about that thing, that person, that experience is the new story. However, there is actually an easier way to revise. Sammy Ingram talks about it, and that's revising just through affirmations. The way that I've been revising through affirmations is simply by using certain phrases. So one of the phrases that I use is, that's how it's always been. It negates anything that might be contrary to that. If I say, I'm always chosen, that's how it's always been, then I'm telling my subconscious mind, from the dawn of time, when dinosaurs were here, I'm chosen, right? Another phrase that I use is, I have always been, right? So instead of just saying I am always chosen, which works in itself, I use the term I have always been as a way to revise it. I have always been chosen. I have always been committed to. I have always been loved. I have always been desired. If you're manifesting a specific person, you can even use the I have always, or that's how it's always been, with your affirmation. So let's say that you are manifesting commitment with a specific person. So you can say, of course, I am in a committed relationship with SP. But you can revise that and say, I have always been in a committed relationship with SP. Or I'm in a committed relationship with SP, that's how it's always been. Same goes for money. I am rich. Okay, that's great. I have always been rich. For me, that's better. Or I am rich. That's how it's always been. So I've been using this technique, revising in that way through affirmation for a couple of days, and ultimately what we need to change is self, and I have been feeling a shift. I'm not gonna go into the old story, but I feel more confident, I feel more secure, and I feel like I'm starting to believe that I have always been chosen, that I have always been in committed and long-term and healthy relationships. That's how it's always been. Another affirmation that I've been throwing in there, because I affirm kind of like I'm having an inner conversation with myself, is I have always been lucky in love. Like, relationships have always been easy for me. That's why I've always been chosen. That's why I've always been committed to quickly and for long term. That's why I've always been loved by the men that I love. It's so natural for me to think that way, and that's why I use these affirmations, because when we have these internal conversations with ourselves, that's all affirming is, we're just talking to ourselves, right? It's like, I pretend I'm talking to my subconscious, like, yeah, no, but this is how it's always been. Like, I've always been loved. It feels natural, and I believe that it's easier for me to repeat. It makes affirming much more fun, especially because we use repetition to bring our manifestation, which is already created once we decide, into our 3D reality. So just a note before I end the video, when I first started affirming, I have always been chosen and committed to, I have always been loved, that's how it's always been. I have always been lucky in love and relationships, and I've always had the easiest of relationships. When I started affirming that using revision, it was uncomfortable in the beginning. I felt the resistance. I actually resisted for 6-7 months, because I've been in this law of assumption journey for about a year. And I resisted for about 6-7 months affirming I am always chosen, because I had so much resistance to it. And I would say it and be like, it feels weird, I don't like it. But I decided a couple of days ago, like at the core, I know that that is something that I have to work on with self-concept because of old story. It might be uncomfortable to affirm things that don't feel natural to your narrative, right? To the old version of you, to the life that you have experienced, especially when it comes to relationships, love, and even money. It might be difficult to be like, I am always in the best of relationships. I am always loved. I am always chosen. I have always been chosen. Especially if you say it with revision, okay? I have always been rich. You know, your subconscious mind is gonna be like, oh, but remember where we weren't? But remember when that guy did that? You know, like it's going to try to revert you back to the old narrative, because that's all your subconscious knows if you've never been affirming for these things, and especially if you haven't affirmed using revision. There will come a point where you say it enough. That's why repetition is key. That is going to feel much more natural. It feels a lot more natural for me. I've been affirming with revision. I have always been chosen. I've always been loved. I have always been committed to quickly and for long term. I've always been lucky in love. That's how it's always been. I've always had the best of relationships. That's how it's always been. I have been affirming that for maybe 3 days. And I feel a sense of calm when I affirm it now. I actually want to affirm it more. I set my timer 3 times a day to do that block. And I find myself affirming it more than 3 times a day because it just makes me feel good to say it. Which means that something is shifting within me, that I'm actually believing it. And once we feel that shift, we start seeing the things in the 3D. And I have been seeing some things in the 3D where I'm like, wait a minute. Okay. Okay. And then I'm going to start believing it, because now, because of the way people are treating me in the 3D, due to my claiming I'm always chosen, I'm always loved, I've always been committed to, I've always had the easiest of relationships. You know, all the men that I choose me. It's always been that way. That's how it's always been. I'm starting to expect it because it's becoming an assumption for me. I didn't believe it at first, but the more that I affirm it, I feel more powerful. And then I start seeing things in the 3D, because my perception of myself, of my self-concept, is now the woman that has always been chosen, that has always been loved, that has always been committed to. And that is the power of revision, but it's also the power of those affirmations. So that's how I've been revising on the spot. And that's how I've been using those self-concept affirmations to truly change the old story that has plagued me for many years, but no longer does, because I claim that I'm always chosen. That's how it's always been. Thank you so much for joining me. Subscribe if you like this content, like the video. It really helps spread it, and I'll see you next time.